Mist clung to the peaks of Aloria like a shroud, softening the jagged edges of cliffs and forests into an ethereal painting. The mountains, ancient and unforgiving, had long been a place of both wonder and fear. Legends told of hidden valleys where the sun never touched the ground and of rivers that sang songs of old battles. Villages dotted the lower slopes, their wooden roofs dark with centuries of storms, smoke curling upward in lazy spirals as if reaching for answers only the sky could provide. Among these villages, none were more isolated than Eldar's Hollow, a settlement of crooked cottages and narrow cobblestone streets. Life here moved in measured rhythms dictated by the sun, the soil, and the seasons. The villagers had long learned to respect the mountain's moods, for Aloria was as much alive as it was beautiful. They spoke in hushed tones of the shadows that travel at twilight, creatures said to vanish with the dawn. Most dismissed such tales as superstition. Most, but not all. Ca. Len, the Luminous, was among the few who did not dismiss them. He walked through Eldar's Hollow before dawn, his steps silent against frost-covered stones. His cloak, a deep shade of midnight, shimmered faintly in the starlight, and in his hands he carried a lantern unlike any other. Its frame was wrought from bronze and etched with swirling patterns that seemed to shift if one looked too closely. Inside, the light was pale but unwavering, a gentle radiance that felt alive, as if it pulsed with its own heartbeat. Kaelen's life had been solitary, shaped by a purpose he had never fully understood. From childhood, he had wandered the mountains, learning the songs of streams, the patterns of wind, the secrets of stone. Villagers whispered about the boy who spoke to the peaks as if they answered him in kind. They called him strange, eccentric, even dangerous, but Kaelen bore their judgment lightly. There was a weight upon him, one that had been placed long before he had any notion of it, a legacy tied to the lantern he now carried. The lantern was more than a source of light. It was a key, though, to what Kaelen had not yet discovered. Stories, old and half forgotten, suggested it contained the first light of dawn, captured by the sun goddess Solara herself. How much of that was truth, and how much legend, Kaelen could not say. What he did know was that the lantern responded to him, subtly, in ways no ordinary object should. It brightened when danger was near and dimmed in the presence of deceit or sorrow. And sometimes, in the quietest moments, Kaelen could swear it whispered this morning was different. The wind carried a chill sharper than usual, slicing through even the thickest of furs and cloaks. The mist moved unusually fast, curling like smoke through the village streets and pooling at the edges of homes. Birds did not sing, dogs did not bark. Even the river that wound through Eldar's Hollow seemed to hesitate, its current slower, as if listening. Kaelen paused atop a small rise overlooking the village, lantern held high. He could see the fog pressing against the cottages like a tide, grey fingers reaching for doorways. His sharp eyes caught movement shadowy figures flitting along the cobblestones, but whenever he blinked, they vanished. He frowned. The lantern flickered once, twice, and then steadied. That was the signal. Trouble was coming, though its nature remained a mystery. He moved to the center of Eldar's Hollow, where the villagers gathered around the well. Old Marwyn, the blacksmith, was among them, his hands calloused from decades of hammering iron. "Kaelen," he said, voice low and wary, "you feel it too, don't you?" Kaelen nodded slowly. The mountains are restless. Something stirs in the fog. This is no ordinary chill. A murmur spread through the villagers. Children clutched at their mothers' skirts. Even the stoic hunters exchanged uneasy glances. Kaelen could feel their fear, palpable and thick like the morning mist. He raised the lantern higher, letting its warm glow cut through the grey. "We will know soon enough," he said. "Whatever it is, it comes from the peaks, and it is patient. But patience is not always a gift." He left the villagers to their whispers and began the climb toward the first ridge. The path was narrow, lined with frost-laden trees whose branches creaked under the weight of snow. Every step seemed to echo unnaturally, though the air was otherwise still. Kaelen's mind wandered back to his childhood, to the nights his mother had told him stories of Aloria's old guardians, warriors, and sages whose deeds had been erased by time. Some vanished for reasons unknown, others perished protecting secrets no one now remembered. He had always known he was connected to something like that, though he had never dared to imagine the full extent as he ascended. The fog thickened, swallowing the world. The lantern's light barely reached the ground, casting long, wavering shadows that danced across the trunks of twisted trees. That was when he heard it. A whisper, low and melodic, threading through the wind. It was almost a voice, though not entirely human. "Kaelen," it called, distant but unmistakable. He froze. The lantern's glow pulsed stronger, responding to the sound. Every instinct screamed caution, but he pressed forward, stepping carefully along a hidden track that wound up the mountainside. The whisper returned, closer now, mingling with the rustle of unseen wings and the snap of ice underfoot. Hours passed, or perhaps mere moments. Time felt strange in the fog. Kaelen finally reached a plateau where the mist thinned, revealing a valley below that seemed untouched by human eyes. Its waters shimmered like liquid silver, reflecting an impossibly large moon. The air was electric, humming with a power Kaelen could feel in his bones. And there, standing at the center of the valley, was a figure cloaked entirely in shadow. Kaelen raised the lantern. The light flared, bright and unwavering, and the shadow shivered. A low, almost imperceptible hiss filled the air, a sound that was both warning and lament. Kaelen knew then that the legends were true, the nightshades were real, and something had called them forth after centuries of slumber. He took a deep breath, the lantern steady in his hands. The shadows moved as if testing him, rippling across the valley floor. And then the whisper came again, this time unmistakable. "Guardian of the first light." The words struck him like a hammer. This was more than a test. This was a summons. The weight of his legacy pressed on him, heavy and relentless. He felt fear, but also a strange exhilaration. For the first time, Kaelen understood the purpose that had always been waiting for him, hidden in plain sight within the peaks, within the fog, and within the lantern itself. Night fell fully over the plateau, the fog thickening into an almost tangible wall. Kaelen's lantern was the only thing that pierced the darkness, a solitary beacon against the encroaching shadow. The figure in the valley stirred, shifting shape, growing taller, more imposing, and Kaelen, for the first time in his life, raised his voice to meet the unseen threat. "Come," he said, calm and steady. "If you wish to challenge the light, then step forward." The valley answered in silence. Then a single figure emerged from the fog, tall and fluid, its form both terrifying and sorrowful. Kaelen's grip tightened on the lantern. His heart pounded, not just with fear, but with the thrill of destiny unfolding. Somewhere deep in the mountains, the first notes of a long-forgotten song began to echo, a song of guardians, of shadows, of battles fought for light and life. Kaelen knew this was only the beginning. The mountains were waking, and so was he. The lantern pulsed again, its light stronger, as if breathing in unison with him. Beyond the fog, the world held its breath. And in that moment, Kaelen understood that his story, the story of a forgotten hero, was about to be written in fire and shadow, in whispers and roars, and in the golden light of a dawn yet to come. The sun had barely touched the horizon when Eldar's hollow stirred with unease. Shadows lingered longer than they should, stretching along the cobblestones like fingers searching for something lost. Children clung to their mothers' skirts, while the elders, usually steadfast in their routines, whispered nervously at the edges of the square, though the chill of dawn brushed against their cheeks. It was not cold that weighed upon them. Weighed was anticipation, the quiet fear of something unseen moving just beyond sight. Kaelen had returned to the village the previous night, guided by instinct and the pulsing lantern, though no one could say exactly what he had seen. He said nothing, for words could not explain the darkness that slithered at the edges of the mountains, nor the whispers that clawed at his mind in the silent hours. But the villagers had noticed the faint glow of his lantern flickering even from the ridge, a lone light defying the encroaching grey dot. By mid-morning, the first signs of the nightshades became apparent. It began subtly: livestock gone, disturbed nests, trees bent unnaturally as though pushed by invisible hands. A farmer, old and stooped, reported hearing a voice singing from the fog, a melody that made his knees tremble and his heart ache with memories he did not recognize. "Kaelen," the man said to himself, pale and trembling, "we are not ready for what walks these mountains." Kaelen observed quietly, letting the villagers speak, learning from their fear. The nightshades were not mindless. They were cunning, drawn to emotion, feeding on despair, doubt, and the quiet panic of mortals. Every flicker in the mist, every shadow that moved against the trees, was calculated, and they were growing bolder. He decided it was time to act. Clutching the lantern, he climbed to the highest ridge overlooking the hollow. From there, he could see the valley below, a swirling sea of grey fog. It was alive. Shapes moved within it, sometimes long and thin like spires of smoke, sometimes coiled like serpents. The whispers returned, barely audible, teasing the edge of comprehension. "Kaelen." The lantern's light flared, responding to the call. Its glow grew warmer, almost as if trying to reassure him, to say that he was not alone. Kaelen breathed deeply, recalling the training of his youth, the lessons whispered to him by those who had once walked these mountains before him: to listen, to observe, to trust not only in the strength of arms, but in the light that could guide the lost. He descended toward the village. Each step was deliberate, careful, for the path was treacherous, the ground slick with frost, and the fog thick enough to swallow a man whole. As he walked, memories surfaced, nights spent learning the old songs, days spent mapping the peaks and rivers, months of solitude in the wilderness. He had always known the mountains demanded something of him, though he had not realized the full measure until now. Reaching the village, he found a small crowd gathered around a lone figure at the well, young Leora, the blacksmith's daughter. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, as she clutched a bundle of herbs in one hand. "Kaelen," she said, voice trembling, "I saw them. In the fog. They whispered my name. They promised things. Terrible things." Kaelen knelt beside her, letting the lantern's glow wash over her face. "The nightshades speak to the heart," he said gently. "They seek to turn fear into chains, but you are not theirs. None of you are. Remember that, Leora. Remember who you are. Her hands shook as she dropped the herbs. The air around them thickened, and for a moment, Kaelen thought he saw shadows moving faster than they should, darting between houses, between walls, between the very breath of the villagers. He gripped the lantern tighter. It hummed faintly, and he knew instinctively that its light alone could not banish the coming darkness. Something more was needed: courage, resolve, and perhaps a confrontation with the source itself. That evening, Kaelen convened a council at the largest hall in Eldar's Hollow. The room was modest, walls lined with wooden beams and soot-darkened stones, but it was enough to shelter them from the first assault. Villagers gathered, anxious and uncertain, eyes flicking to Kaelen and a lantern as if it were a talisman capable of holding back the encroaching shadow. Kaelen spoke clearly, his voice steady despite the tremor beneath his ribs. The nightshades are real. They are coming, and they are patient. They will test your fear, your doubt, your hope, but they can be resisted. Not by steel alone, nor by walls, nor by prayers. They feed on what we hide from ourselves. Courage, truth, and light are the only weapons that work against them. Some villagers shifted uneasily, murmuring doubts. Kaelen looked directly at them, the lantern casting sharp patterns on his face. I cannot fight this for you. I can guide you. I can show you how to face the darkness. But you must walk into it yourselves, even if only in spirit. Fear is contagious. Courage is stronger. As night fell, the fog deepened. Shapes began to move in the periphery of vision, shapes that should not exist. They whispered, calling the names of children, lovers, lost family, lost memories. The air was thick with promises of despair. Doors rattled. Windows trembled. Even the lantern, radiant as it was, could not push back the encroaching grey entirely. Kaelen stood at the center of the hall, the lantern held high. He spoke again, louder this time. Tonight we do not cower. Tonight we face them, even if only to hold the line. Trust the light, and trust one another. Fear is a shadow, but together we are fire. The first real attack came just as the moon rose high. Figures, tall and fluid, emerged from the mist. They moved silently, gliding across the village square, their forms shifting like smoke and water. Their faces, when glimpsed, were hollow, as if mirrors reflecting the deepest fears of those who gazed upon them. Kaelen raised the lantern. Its glow flared, casting long, jagged shadows that pierced the nightshades like spears of gold. The figures recoiled, writhing as though stung, but they did not retreat entirely. The whispers intensified, a chorus of longing and sorrow, of promises made and broken across centuries. He felt the first touch of their power, a prickling at the edge of thought, a tugging at memory, an urging to despair. He focused on the lantern, letting its light grow until it bathed the hall and the square outside in brilliance. The nightshades shrieked, the sound a mix of agony and rage, a language older than the mountains themselves. The villagers, seeing the lantern's light and Kaelen's calm, drew courage from him. Torches were lit, stones were gathered, and together they formed a line against the fog. Kaelen moved among them, guiding hands, steadying hearts, lending his presence like a shield. Hours passed, perhaps minutes. Time had no meaning in the face of such otherworldly menace. When the first hints of dawn brushed the horizon, the nightshades recoiled one final time. their forms dissipating into the mist with mournful sighs, leaving behind only silence and the faint scent of cold stone and rain. Exhausted, Kaelen sank to one knee, lantern held low. The villagers approached, a mixture of relief and awe in their eyes. You protected us," one whispered, voice trembling. Kaelen shook his head. "I did not protect you. You protected yourselves. The light exists in more than one heart." But even as he spoke, he knew the battle was only beginning. The nightshades were not destroyed, only repelled. Their whispers would return, their shadows would gather again, and deeper mysteries awaited within the peaks of Eloria. The lantern pulsed softly, almost in sympathy with his thoughts, as if reminding him that this was the first step on a path whose end was still hidden. That night, Kaelen climbed once more to the ridge overlooking the village. The fog had thinned but not vanished, curling around the peaks like a living thing. The mountains whispered to him, and this time he answered. The first stirrings of understanding formed in his mind. The nightshades were not merely enemies, they were mirrors of something ancient, something forgotten, something tied irrevocably to him and the lantern he carried, as the stars wheeled overhead. Kaelen felt the weight of destiny settle more firmly upon his shoulders. The journey ahead would demand more than courage, it would demand every secret he had ever learned, every fear he had ever faced, and the willingness to confront the shadows not just in the mountains, but within himself, and from deep within the mist. A single voice, soft, melodic, almost mournful, spoke once more. "Kaelen, the light has chosen. Will you walk the path, or will it walk you?" Kaelen tightened his grip on the lantern. "I will walk it," he whispered to the night, "and I will not falter." The mountains waited. The fog waited. And somewhere beyond the ridge, shapes shifted, listening. Dawn crept slowly over Eldar's hollow, painting the village in muted gold and rose. The fog that had threatened to consume it lingered like a ghost, curling around roofs and drifting between trees. Though the nightshades had retreated, their presence lingered, a memory etched into the very air. Villagers moved cautiously, their eyes flicking to the mountains, wary of shadows, wary of whispers. Kaelen remained on the ridge above the hollow, lantern in hand, its soft light pulsing like a heartbeat. He had spent the night listening to the mountains, the wind, the faint murmurs of the world around him. Each note, each rustle, seemed to carry a hidden meaning, a fragment of the vast story that had been whispered to him since childhood. And he had realized that the lantern was far more than a beacon, it was a key, a repository of power, and perhaps a living remnant of a forgotten era. The villagers, sensing his return, approached carefully. Leora, the blacksmith's daughter, carried a small bundle of herbs and a candle, her eyes wide with curiosity and lingering fear. "Kaelen," she said softly, "why does the lantern, why does it feel alive?" Kaelen lowered the lantern, its glow reflecting in his thoughtful eyes. "Because it is," he said quietly. "This lantern is not mere metal and glass. It contains a fragment of the first light, captured in a time before memory. Legends speak of Solara, the sun goddess, who poured her essence into the crystal so that even in the deepest darkness, a glimmer of hope would remain. But the truth is older than even that," the villagers murmured among themselves. Few understood the depths of what he implied, yet none doubted the weight in his voice. Kaelen took a deep breath and began the tale, speaking not only to Leora and the others, but also to the mountains themselves, as though the peaks themselves listened, long before the villagers. before kingdoms, before even the mountains took their present shape, there existed a city of light. Its name is lost to time, though scholars have referred to it as Sol. The people of Soltharis were alchemists, mystics, and guardians of a knowledge so profound that even the sun feared to illuminate it. They discovered a way to bind light itself, to capture it, preserve it, and wield it as a force of both protection and creation. The lantern you see, he held it higher, letting its gentle radiance spill across the villagers' faces, is a shard of that power. He paused, allowing the words to settle. Some villagers shivered, not from cold, but from the weight of the story. Kaelen's gaze drifted to the mountains beyond, their peaks crowned in mist. The lantern chooses its bearer, he continued. It does not simply obey commands or follow directions. It responds to intent, to courage, to heart. That is why it has chosen me and, perhaps, why I am bound to it. Leora stepped closer, her eyes wide. Chosen, but what does that mean? Why you? Kaelen sighed, the weight of centuries pressing on his shoulders. I do not know entirely. Perhaps because I was prepared. Perhaps because I was willing to listen, to learn, and to face the shadows that others would not. The lantern does not seek heroes in the way stories describe heroes. It seeks understanding, resilience, and the willingness to bear a burden few can imagine. He set the lantern upon a flat stone at the edge of the ridge, its glow illuminating the frost-kissed ground. Kneeling beside it, he traced the intricate patterns etched into the bronze frame. Swirls that seemed to move, symbols that shifted subtly, depicting suns, stars, and shapes that felt both familiar and alien. These marks, he said, are not mere decoration. They are instructions, a guide to wielding the light. Each bearer must decipher them, interpret them, and become one with the lantern, or risk being consumed by it. A soft wind stirred, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine. Kaelen closed his eyes, listening. He could feel the mountains hum, faintly, as if responding to his words. And then, a whisper, almost imperceptible, echoed in the quiet Kaelen. You carry what was lost, what must be restored. His eyes snapped open. The lantern pulsed, brighter than before, as if acknowledging the whisper. Kaelen realized that the nightshades, the encroaching darkness, and the mysteries of the mountains were all connected to this lost knowledge. The shards of light scattered across time, once united, could banish shadows, but only if wielded wisely. Kaelen rose and began to pace the ridge. His mind raced with questions. How many fragments of light still existed? Could the nightshades be more than mere predators of fear? And what price would the bearer of the lantern pay in attempting to restore what was lost? As the morning sun broke through the mist, Kaelen descended toward the village, lantern held high. Villagers watched silently, sensing both his determination and the invisible burden he carried. We cannot face what comes with only tools and torches, he said. We must understand it, and in understanding, find the courage to confront it. The blacksmith, Marwyn, stepped forward, his face lined with worry. Kaelen, if the lantern is as old as you say, if it contains the first light, why has no one found it before? Why was it forgotten? Kaelen's gaze drifted to the horizon. Because it hides itself. Only the one prepared to bear it can find it. Others saw only metal and glass. Others feared it. And some were not ready. For hours, Kaelen spoke of the city of Soltharis, recounting its wonders, its scholars, its temples of crystal light. He described the great library, filled with manuscripts that glowed faintly in the dark, and halls where statues of radiant beings kept silent watch over knowledge too dangerous for the uninitiated. He spoke of the city's fall, of betrayal and hubris, of shadows that rose when ambition overshadowed wisdom. The villagers listened, captivated and fearful. Even as they absorbed the tale, the lantern glowed softly, almost as if it understood the story, as if it mourned the loss of Soltherus. Kaelen placed a hand over it, feeling warmth seep into his palm. The light seemed to pulse in response, steady and alive, guiding him. Affirming his path by mid-afternoon, Kaelen knew he could not remain in the village. The nightshades would return, stronger, more cunning, and the knowledge of the lantern was only part of the battle. He needed to seek the ancient shrines scattered across the mountains, fragments of Soltherus hidden within rock, ice, and shadow. Each shrine held a key, a memory, or a test, and only by retrieving them could the full potential of the lantern be realized. Before departing, Kaelen addressed the villagers once more. I will go into the mountains. There are fragments of light still waiting, and shadows that must be confronted. I cannot promise to return quickly. I cannot promise to return at all. But know this, the lantern is not only mine. Its light touches all of you, and in your courage it grows stronger. Guard one another. Trust one another. And above all, do not let fear rule your hearts. With that, he adjusted his cloak, lifted the lantern, and began the ascent into the mountains. The path was treacherous, lined with ice, twisted roots, and the ever-present fog that seemed to thicken with every step. The lantern's light cut through the grey, revealing glimpses of the peaks ahead and casting shadows that danced like spirits in the mist. Hours turned into days, or so it seemed. Time lost meaning among the jagged cliffs and hidden valleys. Kaelen discovered ruins long swallowed by the mountains, temples half buried under stone, symbols glowing faintly in the lantern's light. He deciphered patterns, traced glyphs, and felt the presence of something ancient, watching, waiting, guiding. One night, atop a cliff overlooking a valley filled with whispering fog, Kaelen paused. The lantern pulsed stronger than ever, its light reaching out like fingers toward a distant glimmer. In the center of the valley, he saw it, a shrine, small and ancient, carved from crystal that caught the moonlight and fractured it into colors he could not name. Approaching cautiously, Kaelen felt a resonance in the lantern, a hum that vibrated in his chest and spine. The air thickened, as if charged with unseen energy. He knelt before the shrine, placing the lantern upon its crystalline surface. The light flared, brilliant and blinding, casting patterns across the valley and mountainsides. And then, a voice clear, resonant, and filled with both sorrow and expectation spoke within his mind. Kaelen, you have found a fragment of what was lost. The light will guide, but the shadows will test. Are you ready to bear the burden fully? Kaelen's heart pounded, his hands gripping the lantern. I am ready, he whispered. I will bear it. I will restore what has been forgotten, and I will face the darkness, no matter the cost. The lantern pulsed in response, warm and alive, and Kaelen felt the first true weight of his destiny settle upon his shoulders. He was no longer merely a wanderer, a guardian of a village. He was the bearer of a light older than history itself, and the mountains of Eloria waited to reveal both their secrets and their perils. As the wind rose and the fog swirled below him, Kaelen understood that the path ahead would demand not only courage but sacrifice. Every step would test him, every shadow would seek to unravel his resolve. Yet he did not falter. with the lantern's light leading him. He took the first step into the unknown, into the legacy of Soltharis, into the heart of darkness itself, and somewhere deep within the mist, shapes shifted, whispering, listening, waiting for the story to unfold. The morning fog clung stubbornly to the peaks of Aloria as Kaelen tightened the straps of his cloak. Below him, Eldar's hollow lay still, seemingly safe for the moment. Yet he knew that the nightshades were not gone, they had only withdrawn, biding their time, watching, waiting. Kaelen hoisted the lantern, letting its glow cut through the grey as he began his ascent into the mountains, following a path that had been etched into memory long before he could speak. Each step carried him higher, into terrain both beautiful and treacherous. Jagged cliffs jutted like teeth against the sky, while narrow paths twisted precariously along sheer drops. The wind howled through crevices, carrying with it whispers that seemed to echo not only from the mountains, but from Kaelen's own mind. At times, the fog swirled unnaturally, curling around trees and rocks like living fingers. Kaelen paused beside an ancient oak, its gnarled roots gripping the rocky soil like the fingers of a giant. He knelt, running his hand along the bark, tracing the faint carvings that had long since faded into the grain. The symbols were similar to those etched on the lantern, a language of light and shadow, guiding him toward hidden truths. He pressed his palm to the wood, and the lantern pulsed, warm and steady, as if affirming the path ahead. Hours passed. The sun struggled to pierce the mist, leaving the mountains bathed in muted silver and grey. Kaelen encountered ruins scattered across the slopes, temples half swallowed by stone, statues fractured yet radiating a faint inner glow, and crystal shards embedded in the cliffs that hummed faintly when near the lantern. Each fragment felt alive, as if whispering secrets of a civilization that had once understood the light more fully than anyone now alive could comprehend. As he pressed deeper, the first trial revealed itself. A chasm split the path, a gaping maw of darkness. A rope bridge swayed above the abyss, old and frayed, creaking with every gust of wind. Kaelen stepped carefully, lantern held high, its glow reflecting in the icy mist below. Midway across, the bridge shifted violently, and a shadow slithered beneath the planks. The nightshades had followed him, and though they did not strike, their presence was palpably oppressive weight that pressed on his mind, whispering fears and doubts. Kaelen closed his eyes for a moment, centering himself. The lantern pulsed, warm and insistent. He focused on the light, letting it fill his mind, his chest, and his heart. The whispers grew louder, twisting into shapes of memory faces of loved ones, failures long buried, regrets he had yet to confront. The bridge trembled again, but Kaelen stepped forward, each footfall deliberate. The shadows recoiled, unable to endure the clarity of the light. When he reached the other side, the fog seemed to thin momentarily, and the lantern's glow steadied. Beyond the chasm, the mountains opened into a valley unlike any he had seen. Crystal streams wound between cliffs, their waters glowing faintly with an inner light. Trees with silver leaves whispered in the wind, their branches brushing against each other in a chorus of soft metallic tones. Yet the beauty was deceptive. The fog lingered thickly, hiding unseen dangers, and Kaelen could feel the presence of the nightshades just beyond the veil. Here he discovered the first shrine of Soltharis. Nestled between two cliffs, the shrine was carved entirely from crystal, reflecting the lantern's light in a spectrum of impossible colors. Symbols etched across its surface resonated with the patterns on the lantern itself. Kaelen approached cautiously, sensing a trial within its presence. He knelt, placing the lantern at its center. Immediately, the air thickened, charged with energy. Shapes began to form from the fog, twisting and coalescing into the familiar forms of the nightshades. Yet these were more distinct than before tall, fluid, their forms shifting as though they were made from smoke and water. Their whispers echoed, a cacophony of voices and memories. Fear, doubt, regret, despair. Kaelen, Kaelen. Kaelen inhaled, steadying himself. "You will not break me," he whispered. The lantern pulsed in response, its light flaring brighter, cutting through the fog. The shadows recoiled, writhing as the brilliance touched them. Yet they did not vanish entirely. Instead, they lunged, not with violence, but with trials of the mind, forming illusions of past failures and deepest fears. Kaelen saw his childhood reflected in the mist, the lonely nights he had spent in hidden caves, training and listening to the mountains, the faces of villagers he had failed to protect, the shadows of his own doubts, whispered by voices he had long buried. Each apparition tested his resolve. The nightshades thrived on these moments, but the lantern's light countered them, steady and insistent, guiding him to confront rather than flee. Hours or perhaps minutes passed in this battle of perception. Kaelen realized the trial was not of strength, but of clarity, of understanding. The nightshades were not enemies to be slain with steel. They were mirrors, reflecting what the bearer of the lantern had buried within. Facing them required acceptance, courage, and the willingness to endure the truth of one's own heart. Finally, the illusions faltered. Kaelen stood tall, lantern raised high, and spoke with a voice that resonated over the valley. "I am Kaelen. I am the bearer of this light. You may test me, but you will not sway me. I face both shadow and self, and I will not falter." The nightshades shivered, a collective hiss echoing through the fog. One by one, they dissolved into mist, leaving the valley still and silent. The lantern glowed steadily, its light reflecting in the crystalline waters, illuminating the shrine with an otherworldly brilliance. Kaelen knelt before it, pressing his hand to the crystal. He could feel a surge of energy, a fragment of ancient knowledge flowing into him. Symbols etched in the stone aligned with the lantern's light, revealing truths of Soltheris, fragments of wisdom long forgotten. Kaelen understood now that this journey was only beginning. Each shrine would hold its own trial, its own fragments of light, and its own confrontation with the shadows that had grown restless over centuries. The nightshades were merely guardians, echoes of the ancient city's fall, ensuring that only the worthy could claim the power of Sol Ther. As night fell over the valley, Kaelen set up a small camp beside the shrine. The lantern's glow bathed the area in warm light, and he allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. He thought of Eldar's Hollow, of the villagers who trusted him, and of the weight of the lantern he now bore. Each trial would test him further, each shadow would attempt to unravel his resolve. And yet he felt a strange exhilaration, a sense of purpose that had been absent for so long. From the darkness beyond the ridge, he sensed movement. Shapes shifted in the fog, whispering, waiting, observing. The nightshades had retreated, but their vigilance was far from over. The mountains themselves seemed to pulse with anticipation, as if aware that Kaelen had taken the first true step in reclaiming the lost light of Soltheris. Kaelen closed his eyes, breathing in the cold mountain air. The lantern pulsed gently against his chest, a reminder that he was never alone. Each trial, each fragment of light, would bring him closer to understanding and to the confrontation that awaited in the heart of the mountains. He would face shadows, secrets, and sacrifices. Yet he was ready. The fog rolled in again, thicker now, blanketing the valley in grey. But the lantern's light pierced it, steady and unwavering, a beacon of hope in a world suspended between night and dawn. Kaelen rose, lantern in hand, and looked toward the peaks ahead. The path was long, treacherous, and filled with mysteries that defied imagination, but he would walk it step by step, facing both the shadows of the mountains and the shadows within himself. Somewhere deep in the mist, a whisper echoed once more, soft and haunting. The journey has begun. The light will test you. Kaelen tightened his grip on the lantern, eyes fixed on the path ahead. I am ready, he whispered, and with that, he stepped forward into the unknown. The valley lay in restless silence. The crystalline shrines glow, the only barrier between light and encroaching darkness. Kaelen had travelled farther than any villager could imagine, and each step had deepened his understanding of the nightshades, not mere monsters, but echoes of sorrow, fragments of lost souls, bound to the shadow of a forgotten city. Yet he was not prepared for the figure that now awaited him beyond the mist. At first she was barely visible, ripple in the fog, taller than any man, her form fluid and ever-shifting. Slowly she stepped forward, and the mist coalesced around her, revealing her full shape, the Nightshade Queen. She was vast and terrifying, her form a cascade of darkness that absorbed the lantern's glow rather than reflected it. Her eyes, two deep voids, seemed to peer directly into Kaelen's soul. And yet, despite the terror she inspired, there was a sorrow in her presence, a loneliness older than the mountains themselves. Kaelen held the lantern high, its light strong but wavering against her shadow. He took a deep breath, recalling the lessons of the previous trials. The nightshades tested perception and fear. They sought to expose doubt, regret, and despair. But this was different. The Queen radiated a power that reached beyond fear. It spoke of grief, betrayal, and the weight of centuries. You have come far. Bearer of light, she whispered, her voice both melodic and mournful, echoing through the valley. Few have ever reached me. Fewer still have the strength to face what lies within. Kaelen's pulse quickened. I do not seek to destroy you, he said, voice steady despite the cold grip of fear. I seek understanding. The light I carry is not meant for death, it is meant to restore what was lost. The Queen tilted her head, and for a moment Kaelen thought he glimpsed a flicker of recognition in her shadowed eyes. Restoration comes at a cost, she said. The light reveals truths that can break the strongest hearts. Are you willing to pay it? Kaelen tightened his grip on the lantern. I am. The Queen's form surged, folding and unfolding like smoke caught in a storm. The ground beneath Kaelen trembled as her shadows extended, forming tendrils that brushed against the cliffs, rustled the crystalline waters, and whispered with voices older than memory. They mimicked faces and voices Kaelen had loved and lost, calling out in sorrow and warning, attempting to fracture his resolve. Kaelen stood firm. The lantern flared, cutting through the illusions, bathing the valley in golden brilliance. The Queen recoiled slightly, a hiss of frustration escaping her. Few endure the first test, she murmured. You wield your light, but do you understand its weight? I understand that it bears responsibility, Kaelen replied. It is not mine alone. I carry it so others may have hope, so shadows may be confronted, and so truth may shine. For a moment the queen hesitated, her shadow form faltering. Then, with a movement like liquid silk, she advanced, and Kaelen felt the first true touch of her power. The shadows enveloped him, not with violence, but with sensation visions of Soltharis, of the city's fall, of the scholars who had betrayed each other, of the anguish of those trapped within shadow. He saw a child crying as the city burned, a woman whispering secrets into stone, a man screaming into the void as darkness consumed him. Each vision struck him in the chest, testing his resolve, attempting to break his spirit. Kaelen gritted his teeth, letting the lantern's warmth fill him. Its light spread through his body, illuminating the visions with clarity rather than fear. He realized then that the queen was not malevolent. She was a guardian of the past, bound by sorrow and duty, seeking to ensure that only the worthy could claim the light of Soltharis. "You feel the weight of history," the queen said, voice both gentle and commanding. "You see what was lost, what was betrayed, what was broken. And yet you do not despair. You embrace the burden. That is rare and dangerous." Kaelen's eyes met the queen's void-like gaze. "I will carry it," he said, "not to control, not to dominate, but to restore. I will bear the consequences, and I will face the shadows, because that is what the light demands of me." The queen recoiled, then circled him slowly, her form fluid and rippling. Very few have spoken with such resolve. Most falter, crumble, or flee. She extended a tendril of shadow toward him, and Kaelen instinctively raised the lantern. The light flared, casting intricate patterns across her form, illuminating fragments of memory embedded within the shadows. Kaelen glimpsed a human figure beneath the darkness, a woman, regal yet sorrowful, bound in shadow for eternity. "You are trapped," Kaelen whispered. "Why?" The queen's eyes seemed to glimmer faintly, like a dying star. "I sought to protect the light," she said, "to guard it from those who would abuse it, but I failed. Betrayal and greed consumed Soltharis. My own people turned against each other, and the shadows claimed me as punishment. And as duty, I have lingered here, bound by regret, waiting for one who could understand, who could endure, who could restore what was broken." Kaelen's heart ached at the revelation. He had expected a monstrous entity, a being of pure malice. Instead, he found sorrow, wisdom, and an impossible burden carried alone for centuries. The lantern pulsed in his hands, warm and insistent. It seemed to respond not only to his courage, but to his empathy. "You do not need to remain in the shadow," Kaelen said gently. "I do not seek to destroy you. The light can free you if you trust it, if you trust me." The queen's form quivered, shadows twisting violently. "To be freed, the light must touch all of the darkness within me. Are you certain you are prepared for that responsibility? One mistake, and you could become what you seek to destroy." Kaelen took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the mountains, the legacy of Soltharis, and the lives of countless innocents resting upon his decision. "I am certain," he said. "I accept the risk. I accept the burden. I will not fail." The lantern flared brighter, responding to his resolve. The queen's shadows wavered, then began to shimmer with streaks of gold, silver, and crimson light. Kaelen stepped forward, the lantern held high, and placed it between them. The light pulsed, extending tendrils of brilliance into the queen's shadow form. The air shimmered, and a harmonic resonance filled the valley. As if the mountains themselves were singing, the shadows twisted violently. and Kaelen felt a psychic strain as the queen's grief, rage, and centuries of memory surged into him. Pain, sorrow, and doubt threatened to overwhelm him, yet he held firm, channeling every ounce of courage and focus into the lantern. Light and shadow intertwined in a cosmic dance, illuminating the valley in waves of brilliance and darkness. Finally, with a shuddering sigh, the queen's form began to solidify. The darkness peeled away, revealing a woman, tall and regal, her face marked by sorrow but softened by relief. Her eyes glimmered with recognition and gratitude as she looked at Kaelen. "You have done what no one else could," she said softly. "You have endured, you have understood, and you have restored what was lost. Soltheris' legacy can continue." Kaelen lowered the lantern, exhausted but steady. "It is not mine alone," he said. "The light belongs to all who carry courage and hope. You are free, and your burden is lifted." The queen stepped closer, her presence no longer oppressive but radiant, luminous in its own right. "Then I will guide you further," she said. "There are more fragments, more shadows, and more truths waiting in the mountains. Your path is just beginning, Kaelen, bearer of light. And you are no longer alone for the first time." Kaelen felt a profound sense of connection, not just to the lantern, the mountains, or the lost city of Sol, but to the living essence of its guardians, to the echoes of history, and to the destiny he was now fully embracing as night fell. The valley shimmered with a mixture of mist, light, and newfound hope. The Nightshade Queen, no longer a creature of pure shadows, stood beside him, a guide, an ally, and a living testament to what courage, understanding, and light could achieve. The mountains whispered their approval, the stars wheeled overhead, and Kaelen knew that the journey ahead would test him further, but that he now carried not only light, but wisdom, trust, and purpose. The path to the next shrine stretched before them, jagged, perilous, and filled with shadows yet unseen. Kaelen adjusted his cloak, lantern in hand, and began the ascent once more. The Nightshade Queen walked beside him, her form luminous now, a beacon of the unity of light and shadow, sorrow and hope, past and future. Somewhere deep within the mountains, whispers stirred, waiting to see if the bearer of the first light and the liberated guardian would be able to claim the rest of Soltheris' legacy and confront the shadows that still lingered, hidden and patient. Kaelen tightened his grip on the lantern. The journey had grown heavier, more perilous, and more wondrous, but he was ready. Together they stepped into the unknown. The mountains of Eloria stretched endlessly before Kaelen and the Nightshade Queen. The moon had slipped behind jagged peaks, leaving the world in a delicate twilight. The lantern's glow carved a path through the fog, painting the jagged cliffs in warm hues that defied the cold. Every step forward carried Kaelen closer to the unknown, and he could feel the weight of Soltheris fragments in the lantern's light pulsing like a heartbeat, reminding him that each step was both promise and peril. They approached the second shrine, perched precariously on a cliff that overlooked a valley shrouded in mist. From a distance, it appeared unremarkably simple stone structure, but as Kaelen drew nearer, the air shimmered with latent energy. He recognized the signs immediately. This shrine would test not only his courage, but his willingness to sacrifice. The Nightshade Queen, walking beside him, murmured, "This trial is different. It will demand more than bravery. It will demand what you hold most dear. Are you prepared?" Kaelen nodded, though unease tugged at his chest. "I have no choice," he said. The path demands it, and I must see it through. The moment he stepped into the shrine circle, the air thickened. The mist rose, coalescing into shapes that reflected the deepest fears and regrets of Kaelen's heart. First came the village, Eldar's hollow, engulfed in shadows. The lantern flickered violently, its glow straining against the oppressive darkness. Voices called from the mist, the voices of those he had failed to protect, echoes of the Nightshade's previous manipulations. Kaelen, you are not enough. You cannot protect them. He clenched his fists around the lantern, forcing the warmth and light to anchor him. I am not alone, he whispered. The Queen's presence beside him bolstered his courage, but he knew that this trial required more than support. It required sacrifice. The shadows morphed, weaving into the shape of a great serpentine creature, its eyes glowing with the intensity of despair. Its voice, low and undulating, reverberated within Kaelen's mind. Give up the lantern. Relinquish your burden. Let fear guide you, and your pain will end. Kaelen's breath caught. The lantern was his responsibility, but it was also a beacon of hope. To surrender it even momentarily would doom the valley, perhaps the entire path to He tightened his grip, feeling the warmth surge through him, matching the cadence of his heartbeat. No, he said firmly. I will not abandon the light. I will endure. I will sacrifice what must be sacrificed. At that, the serpentine shadow lunged, not with teeth, but with a surge of psychic energy, attempting to seize Kaelen's memories, hopes, and fears. Pain shot through his chest, and he stumbled to one knee, the lantern held high. Images of Soltherus' fall, the Nightshade Queen's sorrow, and the weight of the lives depending on him swirled violently. Kaelen let go not of the lantern, but of himself. He surrendered his fear, his doubt, and even his pride into the light. The lantern flared brighter than ever, its golden radiance unraveling the shadow's grip. A deep, resonant sound filled the valley, like 1,000 hearts beating in unison. The shadows shrieked and dissolved, and the shrine itself seemed to hum in approval. A harmonic resonance of restoration. But the trial was not yet complete. From the center of the shrine, a pedestal emerged, glowing faintly. On it lay a crystal, radiant with inner light, a fragment of Soltherus itself. Kaelen stepped forward, reaching to claim it, but the moment his fingers brushed the surface, a vision struck him. He was back in Eldar's hollow, but the village was aflame. People screamed, running from shadows that mirrored their deepest regrets. Leora, the blacksmith's daughter, fell, and Kaelen could not reach her in time. The lantern flickered, warning him that the vision was not a mere illusion, but a representation of what would happen if he failed this trial. Kaelen staggered, sweat dripping down his brow. The weight of choice pressed down on him. Claim the fragment and risk the vision becoming reality, or retreat and let the path to Soltherus remain incomplete. The Nightshade Queen stepped beside him, placing a luminous hand on his shoulder. The lantern has chosen you, she whispered. Do not let fear dictate your action. True sacrifice is not the absence of fear, it is acting in spite of it. Kaelen took a deep breath, letting the lantern's warmth flood through him. He understood then that the trial was not about abandoning the light or succumbing to fear. It was about accepting responsibility, acknowledging the cost, and being willing to endure pain for the sake of hope. He grasped the crystal fragment, and immediately a surge of energy coursed through him. The vision of the village burned away, replaced by clarity and light. The lantern absorbed the fragment, pulsing brighter, its glow spreading through the shrine and cascading into the valley below. Kaelen fell to his knees, exhausted but steady, feeling the weight of history and responsibility settle into him. The Nightshade Queen watched silently, her form radiant now, luminous with the remnants of shadow transformed into guidance. "You have passed," she said, "but the path ahead will be harder. Each fragment carries a greater burden, each trial a deeper truth. Sacrifice will be necessary, and not all burdens can be shared." Kaelen nodded, rising slowly. "I understand, and I am ready." Night fell completely, and the mountains whispered their approval, perhaps their warning. The path to the next shrine twisted higher, jagged cliffs and hidden crevices demanding every ounce of vigilance. The lantern's glow illuminated faint trails etched into stone, patterns that mirrored those on the fragments he now carried. Each step was deliberate, each breath measured. As Kaelen climbed toward the unknown, hours turned into a relentless journey, with the lantern's light guiding him through treacherous passes, thin air and sudden storms that swept down from the peaks. The Nightshade Queen stayed close, her presence both comforting and awe-inspiring, her luminous form a constant reminder that shadows could be transformed, not merely vanquished in the heart of the storm. Kaelen encountered another fragment of Solthara's past, a bridge carved from crystal that seemed impossibly delicate, spanning a yawning chasm. The wind howled, and lightning illuminated the valley below, revealing the jagged rocks that threatened to claim him should he falter. The Nightshade Queen murmured, "Balance and focus, Kaelen. The next trial is as much of the body as the mind." Kaelen stepped onto the bridge, feeling it shiver beneath his weight. Shadows stirred beneath the mist, attempting to claw at his feet, whispering warnings and doubts. "You are not strong enough. You are not ready. The light is fleeting." He breathed deeply, centering himself, letting the warmth of the lantern flood his being. One step after another, he moved forward, trusting in the guidance of both light and shadow, in the wisdom of the Nightshade Queen, and in his own courage. At the far side of the bridge, another shrine awaited, glowing faintly through the storm. Kaelen's heart pounded with anticipation and fear, knowing that each fragment brought him closer to the ultimate truth of Soltharasand, closer to the confrontation that would demand everything he had to give. The storm raged on, the wind whipping round him, yet the lantern's light remained unwavering. Kaelen adjusted his cloak, feeling the weight of the fragments against his chest, and stepped into the next trial with resolve. Each sacrifice, each moment of endurance, brought him closer not only to Solthar's legacy, but to the understanding that light and shadow were not enemies. They were threads of the same tapestry, intertwined and inseparable. The dawn would come. Kaelen knew, but not without trials, sacrifice, and courage. And he was prepared to face whatever the mountains demanded, whatever shadows lingered, and whatever cost the lantern required. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger, and alive with mysteries that defied imagination. But Kaelen's resolve was unwavering. With the Nightshade Queen at his side and the lantern's glow leading the way, he stepped forward into the storm, embracing both sacrifice and the promise of dawn.